One of the central issues in critical race theory, one of the central themes of the 1619 Project is this issue of collective shame. The idea of feeling responsibility and feeling guilt and remorse over things that you didn't do. Now, I want to explore this a little bit because Nikole Hannah Jones, the lead author of the 1619 Project, who's kind of a Rorschach test here for the culture. She sort of represents the current thinking among progressives on these sorts of topics. And she went to visit the Hiroshima Museum, and she says that, as an American, I felt shame. And of course, her point is not about, she doesn't care about Hiroshima per se. Her real idea is to immediately pivot to the race issue and make the case for transfers of benefits to blacks. And she goes, the desire for so many Americans to be free of collective shame, collective atonement, and collective responsibility for the shameful legacy of centuries of slavery, racism, apartheid, and terroristic violence. So you can see here, this is essentially the moral case for reparations, that we need to feel collective shame. Now, there have been some libertarian-oriented rebuttals to Nikole Hannah Jones, which I think are inadequate. Here's a fellow named Thomas Chatterton Williams, who essentially says, you have one life and are responsible for your own actions. You will have much to be ashamed of. That'll be your own fault. But, and this is his punchline, don't let anyone compel you to feel shame for other people's actions over which you exert no control. And I suppose to a degree this is true. I mean, let's say I, as an Indian, a person of Indian descent, I don't feel shame over the caste system. Why? I didn't create it. As a Christian, I'm not part of it. The caste system operates within Hinduism. I'm in no way implicated in it, so I detest it. I abhor it, but I disapprove of it. But disapproval is not the same thing as shame. Now, this kind of rhetoric, Nikole Hannah Jones and her friends who are weighing in on this, jump in, what I think is a pretty good point. And they say, in effect, if you embrace pride in good things that America has done, why wouldn't you feel shame for bad things America has done? And it's true, as conservatives, we take a great deal of pride, for example, in the founding. We take a great deal of pride in the accomplishments of America. And so, says Nikole Hannah Jones, shouldn't we, by the same token, just as we didn't do the founding, we're not responsible for those achievements, but if we can feel a justified pride in them, why wouldn't we also take responsibility for the bad stuff? Now, I actually agree that there is such a thing as collective responsibility in certain cases. So, for example, let's apply this to Nikole Hannah Jones. As a black woman, does she feel collective responsibility for the Africans who sold her ancestors into slavery? Does she feel responsibility for her 3,500 fellow blacks in the 19th century who collectively in the American South owned upwards of 10,000 black slaves? I don't see her taking responsibility for those things. It's very interesting that she wants to take responsibility for America. What does she never want to take responsibility for? Well, the obvious answer is the Democratic Party, her own party, because it wasn't America that did slavery. In fact, from the very beginning, there were free blacks in America, and there were emancipation movements. There were emancipation movements in the American South. There were over 100 emancipation movements in the American South around the time of the American founding. 100,000 Southerners fought on the Union side in the Civil War. So if you can point responsibility precisely, you would have to say that the primary responsibility for slavery politically was the Southern Democratic Party allied with the northern wing of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was the party of enslavement. Now, Nikole Hannah Jones is a member of that party. So let's look at the evil she described: slavery, racism, the Democrats essentially invented white supremacy. You didn't need a lot of white supremacy, by the way, under slavery. It was after slavery that white supremacy became the glue holding the Democratic Party together. Apartheid. Who do you think has promoted all the segregation laws in the American South? The Democratic legislature signed by Democratic governors. Not one word about this from Nikole Hannah Jones. So what is really going on here is it's not that I'm objecting to the idea of collective responsibility. What I'm saying to Nikole Hannah Jones is take some responsibility on behalf of your own party, lobby your own party, the Democrats, to publicly acknowledge their role in these grave crimes, accept the responsibility for reparations, send the bill for reparations to the DNC and see if those guys are going to pay it. It seems that really what Nikole Hannah Jones is up to, and this is really why she wants to blame America, is she knows that there are people like me and Debbie, we're immigrants, but we identify with America. We're pro-American. So she somehow wants to foist the responsibility for slavery, racism, apartheid onto people like Debbie and me, instead of recognizing that it belongs squarely on the shoulders of her own political party.